all. So we're thankful to digital conventions. We're thankful for Louis and Dr. Stefan for inviting each and every one of us here. And this is going to be a really, really rich conversation. I want you all to feel comfortable saying whatever comes to your heart. We want folks to, this is the opportunity. Usually they would have to pay a lot of money to hear you all speak. Period. All right. And if they didn't, we'd make sure they pay. We make sure they pay. That's called economic. So today they're getting a freebie. So we're going to use that to our advantage, and we're going to share some knowledge with the folks. So what we're going to do is start off with some light introduction. So I'm going to call you all when I ask you a question or when I pose a question. There will be times when I will say someone's name in particular and pose a question to them. Certainly feel free once that person has finished to respond to the questions, but there are questions divvied out for all of you. And so in the interest of time and in the interest of people's earlobes, I'm having too much going on at one time. It will do soft handoffs to each other also. All right, so based on what I see on my screen, the next person I have is D. Jamel.
Afternoon, y'all.
Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Will do. DJ here. He and him, his pronouns. I am the founder of TMSM Connect, which is a trans-led organization centered around gay, bi, queer, trans guys, and HIV prevention and care and reproductive justice. I'm also the research administrative coordinator, community educator for Emory School of Medicine, clinical research unit. So it's just been an honor to be that bridge to connect community to research. And I'm excited to share my experience here.
Awesome, thank you so much. And we're fortunate to have you today. You provide a wonderful voice that needs to be heard more and more. So next on my screen would be Ms. Chloe Jordan.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Chloe Jordan, and I am a research coordinator for Emory University School of Medicine, Department of Medicine. I am working on a research project by the name of the Light Study, Leading Innovations for Transgender Women's Health and Empowerment. I am also a pre-PA student at Mercer University in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yay! And show us those pearly whites, Chloe. For those who've been following your tooth journey.
Yes, my dental journey.
Yes. You win. Jennifer, I have you next on my screen.
Okay, I'm just trying to mute because I can see that sometimes in the backgrounds of other people, it causes the words not to be heard. So I am Jennifer Barnes Balenciaga, and I am the LGBTQ liaison for State Representative Park Cannon of District 58 in Atlanta, Georgia. And I am also the co-director of Crystal LaBeija Organizing Fellowship, which is a ballroom-based fellowship built on development and helping other persons of trans experience, gender non-conforming, non-binary individuals kind of achieve their goals through right now this year because of COVID. It's been a lot of funding for those individuals. So next year, hopefully we have a lot more learning sessions and in-person movement with one another so we can have a lot more development.
Wonderful, thank you. Ballroom community, rise up. Yes. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well a little later on as we go. So next on my screen is Londyn. Londyn.
Hello, you guys have to excuse my voice. I bruised my vocal cords. So I know, right? And that sounds crazy, right? But they're bruised. So my name is Londyn de Richelieu. I was formerly lead research coordinator at Johns Hopkins University School of Bloomberg School of Public Health for CLEAR, which is Communities Leveraging Evidence for Action and Resources, an initiative that was created to bring in, it was to counteract what was happening with the federally funded Light Study, where it was only for trans feminine. In Maryland, we wanted to include not just trans feminine but non-binary folks as well as trans masculine folks as well. And so the state initiated funding to create this program right through Hopkins. I am LGBTQ commissioner for our mayor's office for economic development. I am liaison to the Baltimore City Police Commissioner on LGBTQ affairs. I was on the Spelman Trans Implementation Committee. Hopefully I'm supposed to be part of the Morehouse Trans Implementation Committee, my alma mater, Morehouse. And let's see, I recently finished at Hofstra Law, and my focus is in health law and policy. So that's where I'm going at now. Since I left Hopkins, I'll be working more so on policy side.
Yeah, we love elevation. We love elevation. You know, sometimes you walk through a door, sometimes you get kicked through one.
Hello.
So. And that lips hopping.
Pop in. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for being here, Londyn. We're excited to have you and excited to hear more from you, all right? And next up, Mr. Cris.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mr. Cris Avery. I'm currently based in Atlanta. I'm the founder of Cris Avery Consulting, which is an international consulting firm working on building equity, centering Black, trans, and queer experiences, which are often left out in many narratives. So doing that, I'm also part of the operations team of TMSM Connect, which D. Jamel Young mentioned earlier, as well as assist with operations at Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative in Georgia. So I'm out here all over.
all over. We all are spread like butter. Like butter. So with that being said, I already heard a word that's going to be great to start this conversation, and that word was equity. So I'd actually like to start off with what I think is one of the most powerful words that we're going to hear today. I would love for you, DJ Mel, followed by Chloe, to tell us a little bit about what equity means for you and for our community.
So definitely having access to funds, to properties, to businesses. Definitely myself identify as an entrepreneur. I definitely encourage my community members to invest in your skill, invest into the things that you love, to build this equity for you and your family, and to pass it down to your community. Too often, especially trans people, we're always going to other people's spaces, whereas we need to be creating our own spaces.
That's good. Thank you, Chloe.
I think in order to define equity, you have to understand what it means. So to understand equity is to understand that everybody does not start from the exact same level playing field. So because of that, there are some people that are going to require a little bit more resourcing than the next person. And we have to make sure that we provide resources across the board to level out the playing field for everyone. So that's what equity means to me.
That's good. That's good. I promise I wish I remember who gave this example first, but I kind of put my own spin on it. So equity. So Londyn, what size shoe do you wear?
A 9, 8.5, 9.
All right. Well, I don't wear an 8.5 or a 9. My foot is bigger than yours. But equality and equity are different, and often people will use those interchangeably. Equality says, Londyn, that we both have a sponsor, and our sponsor is being equal and buys you a Louboutin, a brand new fall 2021 Louboutin, all right, beautiful nude in a size 9. And he also buys me a size 9 in that beautiful fall 2021 nude, all right? It fits great on your foot. That works for us. And he equally distributed his wealth, right? Now, that's not going to do anything. I could wear a 9 as an earring because I'm a big chick. That's a beautiful for you. Equality says we get the same thing, but equity says you get your 9 and I get my 12. All right. It didn't cost him anything to make sure that we both have what we needed. It didn't cost them anything extra. And so when we think about equity, particularly when we're talking about marginalized communities, and in particular the trans and non-binary communities, we have to think that when we give folks, we don't need to always look from a lens of equality. There should be equality combined with equity there, so that the folks who need the most get the most. All right. So with that being said, Londyn Esquire,
Yeah,
not
not yet.
the universe, it's coming. Tell us a little bit about your expectations for the Biden-Harris administration.
Well, my first, I don't even know where to even start. So the first order of business obviously is around the coronavirus, and then dealing with the epidemic. I mean, which we are, unfortunately, we're dealing with a childish, I call it an old gospel house Trump dancing in Paradox back in the 90s. They just won't refuse to go home. She just refused to go home. It's the end of the night at club. Mama will not go home, and that's what Trump reminds me of. But that, of course, is a first priority for me, is dealing with the coronavirus, because until we can get rid of that, we can't really move and do anything else. But a second order of business for me would be for the Trump and Biden administration to roll back a lot of the executive orders that have been put into place that affect so many marginalized communities. I can give you some examples of some of the ones that that have affected trans community, like the one that just recently was issued in 2020 with the Housing and Urban Development in the summer of 2020, creating issues with housing for trans and gender diverse populations. My other main concern for the Biden administration would be to create a kaleidoscope that is more reflective of what our population looks like, right? What if we have our first woman Secretary of Defense? What would that look like? What would it look like to actually have, a Black Secretary of State, a male, well, no, we had two of those. What if we had a trans Secretary of State? What would it look like if we really switch up the narrative? And though our nation right now, when you look at the election, you see that a lot of places voted for Biden, right? So Biden won. However, he got those electoral votes, but in a lot of places in their state legislature, they voted Republican. So it's kind of shows you a cross section of how our country is, that though our country is aiming to be progressive, they still have a little bit of apprehension and fear, and still hold on some of our conservative values. So we got to kind of slowly move. We don't want to move too fast and make people afraid. Excuse me. I think that's how we've been able to heighten up things like the T movement. What do you call it? What do we call them? The ones that got Trump. The movement of conservative Tea Party folks. Tea Party folks, right? So like the Tea Party folks, all that came up because they harked on that apprehension, right? That fear that people were afraid to become a little bit too progressive. So we don't want to, fuel their movement, fuel their agenda, and fuel their platform by moving too fast, but slowly and moderately move into that direction.
Thank you. That was a lot, and it's really, really valuable, and it's a great way to go into this to continue that conversation. Continue that same vein, Mr. Cris. What are some of your advocacy goals for the Biden-Harris administration?
My advocacy goals are around healthcare, because I feel like healthcare is the root of a lot of the things that folks struggle with in society. Mental health, especially. A lot of times when we talk about healthcare, people think just hormones and surgeries. No. How can you get preventative healthcare? Do you have a primary care doctor? Some people haven't seen a doctor since they were in elementary school and now have COVID. So then what does preventative care look like? What does continuous care look like? Do you know how often you need to get a colonoscopy? Do you have the resources to get it? So those are things I think that need to be prioritized. And then housing as well, because housing and healthcare go hand in hand. Because for a lot of medical conditions, you can't, adhere to treatment if you're worried about where you're going to lay your head. And so I think tackling those two things, which tend to be controversial yet dismissed, however, acknowledged constantly as essential, we really need to just bog down and address and come up with real long-term solutions and not just administration to administration tactics.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, this is rich conversation. And we're going to dig a little further with you, Jennifer, because housing and healthcare, two of the main things that the Trump administration has actually reversed and actually implemented policies that are anti-trans in housing and in healthcare. So tell us a little bit about, in the work that you're doing, particularly with Representative Cannon and even in the ballroom, because we want to hear more about that as well, do some as we continue on in this conversation. But tell us a little bit about health and healthcare from your perspective.
As far as what is happening currently, we see that there's a removal of the existence of trans persons and their identities in general. So therefore, it becomes a tug of war and made to seem obsolete that persons who may have religious beliefs that surround the hold on trans persons or their existence in the clutch of their hand, meaning that we have facilities that are now not operating by the humanity of the people they're trying to serve, but more so by their own merit of what they believe in. So what I'm hoping to see to tie both of those subjects together, being someone who was homeless and had to go from couch to couch, it would be nice to see that those behind me have a facility or an ordinance within state regulated movement to have facilities specifically handle property and businesses for persons of trans experience or non-binary, gender non-conforming individuals.
It's really, really rich. And I'm going to stay with you for a second, Jennifer, because we know, and I'm not going to harp on the current administration because they only have 59 days left. And I, for one, will be glad when their asses retire to Mar-a-Lago or to Rikers Island, either one. I'm happy with both. So I will be very, very excited with that. But I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about this. The fact that Ben Carson, serving as the director of the HUD, Housing and Urban Development, that he actually removed protections for trans people, right, and implemented it for trans homeless people, folks who are already society deems triple, quadruply marginalized, that even protections that were there for homeless people of trans experience couldn't have access to homeless shelters to keep them out on the street, even in the midst of a pandemic. So Jennifer, you mentioned that there was a period of homelessness. Can you briefly tell us about that and how you got out of it and how other folks can learn from your example?
Okay. The wonderful thing is, I'm glad you brought up Ben Carson, because that's one of the notions that I think persons of trans experience specifically that are looking for lessons in financial literacy would be best suited to study, being that he had a lot of dealings in the way the housing market and how you purchase homes currently is being moved around, which if you were a person who had the type of funding to buy a home right now, it would be ideal. So those are the very interesting points of persons of trans experience who don't have the ability or the chance to have the economic upstanding in this type of society is a letdown firsthand. And then secondhand, now that we have an attack on transgender persons not having protection in housing situations in general, it's just a total erasure. So I'm excited about 2021 from the administration of State Representative Park Cannon, because we are moving legislation forward that will be presented to kind of sanction homeless shelters to really have an open door policy as it pertains to community at large. And I think a lot of movement with myself has been stemmed from the tenacity that I may see, and then the ideal space that I want to reside or be in is built on a lot of work that I've done from ground up. And it does take a lot of willpower to have yourself be put in situations where there aren't other people like you, but because you have the understanding and back knowledge of what has happened thus far and what is continuing to happen, it kind of makes the drive a little more necessary. And so therefore, anything that is put in the way, in my way as far as a roadblock would be something of a challenge, and I enjoy challenges. And so I make sure to meet them head on, and I encourage everyone else to do the same.
Wonderful, thank you. Great response. So with that being said, I heard erasure, which I certainly want to bring up, but then I heard something with being the only one. I know all of us, everybody that's on this call, I know all of us. And I know that each of us has been in situations where we've been the first and or the only. And there's a certain amount of tokenism that comes with that. So, Miss Londyn, tell us a little bit about tokenism and how you make it work to you. So I charge a lot of money, Mr. Chris. I charge a whole bunch of money to have white people sit in my conversation about leveraging your tokenism. But I want other folks I charge a whole bunch of money to do it. And it's successful and it's great. But I want you all to talk about your experiences with tokenism, again, Londyn. And then I want the audience to know how that can be painful, but also how it can be powerful. Miss Londyn?
Wow. Oh God. This for me is something that it's emotional and really personal. I was actually just talking to Jennifer about this before we came on today, and I was reading that Supreme Court, I was reading that 6-3 decision on gender identity. I was just reading over it and some things, and I was just like so excited about where we're going. And then I thought for a second, and I'm like, someone attempted to get me fired or make me lose my job because they felt as though I was in a place and I was being tokenized, right? Not even that I was being tokenized, but I was in a place and that I represented because of respectability politics and around palatability and all these things around what it looks like, what a trans person should look like or should not look like. They felt as though the position that I was in at my job, although I was the only, and although I am the only, whether I was the only trans person working at the School of Public Health, the only trans person working there, right? And to be Black, and to be I was the only Black assigned male at birth person working in my whole office, right? And for someone to decide to make false allegations, right? To see me in that position, right? And to become jealous and envious, right? And not think about what I had to go through to get there, right? People only see the image in front of them, right? They only see what they think is like nice clothes, or they see what they think is passable or whatever, but they don't understand that you have the same struggles. You went through the same things as they're currently going through, right? But there's this notion, and that's why we need to start talking about palatability and respectability politics and what that, because that is the problem. Like, that's what creates the tokenism a lot of the times, because it's like, who makes you comfortable? It's like, what trans person makes you comfortable? And so that's why they tend to always deal with the same people, because those same people make them feel comfortable, right? The thing about me is that though I make you feel comfortable probably in my presentation, my goal is always to interrupt spaces. Like that is what I'm about. You may use me as a token to get into a space, but what I always do is I grab by the bootstraps my girlfriends and bring them in. Prime example, I was just a repertoire for trans, my mindset is gone today. I'm sorry. What is it? The organization that actually decides all the regulations for trans people in the country. I forgot the name. So basically, I was brought in as a repertoire, okay? And in the conference, you have all these, and the whole town hall was white. There were no Black people in the office. I went across the street to the conference on AIDS, went over there and got my good girlfriends, Tony, Michelle, brought my girlfriends over to the room, shook up that room really, really fast. And, you know, it became, I mean, everyone just could not believe the amount, like the way that they came in. You know, they never expected any of that. But you have to use your tokenism to your advantage. And that's what people have to understand. That's the most important thing. When you are a token, make sure that you uplift and you bring your friends up with you. See, my thing is, I like to get to the table, but when I'm at the table, I love to change the menu, right? I love to change the menu because some people at the table are vegan, some people are vegetarian, and I'm going to change the menu from that carnivorous menu that we're sitting at. I want to change the menu up. And so that's kind of like how I work in my tokenism.
Come on, Mr. Chris.
Yes, I wanted to say, I'm known for being a token. I'm not confused about it. I've been dealing with it since I was a child. I grew up around white people, so white people are comfortable around me. Based on how I speak, the verbiage I use, the tone in which I use it. I'm also honest that I code switch as well, because that's how I've been able to pay my bills.
Real quickly, make sure people know what code switching is, because our mamas taught us that.
So
our Black mothers taught us that.
So code switch is when you speak a particular way that you know is considered proper, comfortable, and acceptable when you're in spaces such as these. However, when you with your people, you chilling, you cutting up, you speaking whatever language, whether it's ballroom and you saying honey and cunty, or whether it's hood and you're like, what's up, my G? And you heard me, whatever. So that's code switching. So you just switch up your language based on your environment, as well as sometimes your clothes. But yeah, it's code switching. So I'm known for that. And it's so interesting what Londyn mentioned about bringing people along, because I make sure that when I'm doing trainings, presentations, or education, you cannot rely on one person alone. So I make sure my team is coming in. And I often, one of the things I do as well right now is market research and recruiting through my consulting. And I make sure I'm the diversity specialist. But when they recruited me for diversity, I made sure it was clear that diversity isn't just Black people, it's not just trans people, but it's people. So I do diversity recruitment. Talk to me later about that. But yes, it's important because I'm in the room, they see me as, okay, this Black trans man of a particular education. However, there are other people's voices that are just as valuable and things that they have to say that need to be heard just as much, if not more in some spaces. But because of my degrees and how I speak, you're more comfortable listening to me, but everyone needs to be heard. And if we listen more to the people we've been ignoring, maybe we would actually get stuff done.
Tori, may I interject?
Yes, please.
So I meant to, the reason I forgot, I was saying, well, the organization is WPATH, obviously that's the world one, but it was the US, it's US Path. I'm sorry, US Path, because I couldn't remember the beginning part. It's US Path.
Yes. And I actually spoke at WPATH last week about patient-centered outcomes and making sure you're including the voices of the people that you agree to serve, not just the same people, because most research is centered around cis white people,
right,
or cis or trans white people, right. And the rest of us aren't included. Yet we are the guinea pigs when they're coming out with new surgical techniques and other things, but that's a whole other conversation we can save for another day.
It's a whole nother. I'm loving this already.
May I just jump in there real quick, Tori, with that? So, and that's another thing that that white people often forget, like when it comes to like getting to us, right? And trying to, you know, there's always a neighborhood, right? In like white communities, there's always a neighborhood. You know how to find like white, gay, white, trans, you know where they are. They're in their neighborhoods, right? Because with Black trans people, we live in our communities, right? We live in those projects, like Black trans people live within Black community. We don't have the resources to separate and move into separate communities, right? Like we live within those spaces, right? And so it's like, there has to be a more macro look at how we get along, because it's not micro with us. Like, we are not like centered into these separate communities where we hang out. No, they're right in your kitchen, your cousin, and though you're asking to call her, she's asked you to call her Michelle, and though you may still call her Michael in the kitchen and be disrespectful, that's your trans cousin is right there in the house with you. They're not in separate neighborhoods, you know? And, you know, so this whole thing of tokenism, it's like, it's not hard to find. It's not hard to find. This is where we are. We're in our own communities.
Yeah, and we learned code switching from our moms. You know, I'm the eldest person on the call. I keep forgetting how old you are, Mr. Chris, but I think I'm the oldest. And mom, you know, your mom, when people would call on the house phone, because that's what we all grew up with. If you're over a certain age, look, Jennifer's eyes popped out, the baby. But if you're over a certain age, there was a one phone or two downstairs, and it had a cord that reached from the kitchen to the living room. Called, and they were from work, and they called to speak to your mom. All of a sudden, it was hello.
Yeah.
Code switching. All right. And as soon as she hung up the phone, boy, if you don't take your code switching. So we learned it. It's something that is intrinsic to our culture. And for many of us, those who often are most successful in the work that we do are folks who have mastered code switching, so that we talk to funders and we talk to folks in language that they understand. It's not denying who you are. And I tell people all the time, Ebonics should be a master class, honey. It should be a master class. And I was just about to ask D. Jamel something. There you go. So we also heard, great. I don't know what's going on over there at Grady. But Grady's got you, right, Chloe? So, all right. So D. Jamel, we heard a lot of rich stuff, and we want to continue this conversation. But I also want to make sure, this is a COVID environment. Had it not been for COVID, this conference would have flown us to a lovely place. An absolutely lovely place, and we would have had great hotel accommodations, at least 2 cute meals, and probably a cute per diem to go along with it, but that's not what we have. So in a COVID environment, how has COVID impacted trans folks and the way that we live and navigate?
Where to begin with that? So COVID has affected trans folks from to surgery, in their mental health, and then having access to the mental health services that they need. I also feel like COVID just shifted attention other places, whether it be away from trans care, HIV care and prevention. We're already in the shadow. I feel like we're pushed further behind. On top of the fact, I feel like what gets us through the days is our ability to connect, and being away from each other, not being able to see each other, not being able to engage. I think that social disconnect has really impacted us in a negative way as well. Yeah, I mean, working in clinical trials, period, and talking to community, COVID has really put a dagger into things.
So staying in that same vein, what does community look like in a COVID environment?
Digital, online, sheltered, disconnected, anxious, everything. Like, even I feel like the drive to take care of ourselves has diminished. You know what I'm saying? People don't even want to have the healthy conversations, whether it's around COVID or HIV or mental health. People just want to be distracted right now because we are distracted. And it's definitely due to COVID.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Chloe, I want you to continue in that same vein. What does community look like for trans folks, for ballroom folks? Because, you know, for pageant folks, for folks, period, and particularly folks of trans experience, what does community look like right now?
To echo some of what D. Jamel said, there is this disconnect. As a trans person, not all trans people, because, you know, I hate when people make blanket statements about any one people, but as a trans person, we already tend to be disconnected from what we consider normal social construct, normal socializing environment. So we're already kind of segregated into our own communities or communities that we are accepted and comfortable in. And then from there, now that has like deconstructed because of this. And here we are, you know, on virtual everything. I have seen some strides by communities, ballroom communities, show worlds, and pageant communities to try to press on and continue on with precautions. But it still doesn't have that same savoir-faire that, you know, it once had in 2019 prior to COVID entering our environment and wreaking havoc. Um, One of the things that, you know, for me personally, one of the things that I tend to battle with is always feeling as if everything that I'm dealing with is only because it's me. You know, I'm the only person in the world who is dealing with this thing. So even right now, even just in this moment, with Deidre Mail expressing literally the same thing that I'm thinking is in relation to feeling disconnected, I'm thinking it's just me. Everybody else is fine. But this is why it's so important that we need to have that connection in our community amongst one another so we can identify with one another. And that way we don't feel so isolated and so alone in these struggles that we're already facing when it comes to our identity as it is.
That's good and rich. Mr. Chris and then Jennifer.
All right. I wanted to offer another perspective. I've actually seen an outpouring of mutual aid support during COVID. Now, there's never going to be enough resources for everybody, but the level of mutual aid I saw going out and people's bills getting paid and support around that was something I had never seen before. And so for me, that was the power of community coming together. Also, it's impacted different industries that are often taken for granted that people survive off of, like, you know, pageants, balls. If you can't rent the venue, you can't have the event, you can't make your money. Sex workers were drastically affected because you're supposed to not have direct contact, but sex work involves direct contact in most cases. So things of that nature, even when we're talking about, you know, adjusting to, you know, Zooms, not everyone has a computer or internet or even the knowledge base to understand how to operate a Zoom. So it's easy for us who operate from a place of privilege to just hop on our computers, on our internet, and do our calls. But for someone who doesn't have a home, that doesn't have internet, that doesn't have a computer, that's not so easy to go to a doctor's appointment as if they were going physically into the clinic, probably get a Metro card, a snack, or a MARTA card and a snack, or whatever card, transportation, and go. It's way harder for them now to access care.
That's good. That's good. So Jennifer and then Londyn. I heard privilege. And this is a group, we bring a lot of privilege into this conversation, into all of the spaces that we enter. I want to hear both of you talk a little bit about privilege in a way that folks don't leave this conversation hating us, but they understand what privilege is and how many of us, and I would dare say most of us, has some type of privilege, and even just like tokenism, how you learn how to navigate that and use it not just to your advantage, but also to folks who have similar backgrounds as we do.
So I appreciate you stating that, right? And I would like to reflect a little bit more about tangible and realistic ideals in that conversation. So with myself being someone who has become someone of a sort of privilege, okay, having your own ability to think and understand things comes as a privilege, right? But you must also remember, in that same vein, being someone in a privileged space, learning to exist in survival makes you unlearn a lot of things, right? And so I want to hit on what Chris spoke earlier about the mutual aid. Again, as I discussed in the beginning, Crystal Abasia Organizing Fellowship was prepared to have a retreat. We were going to go to a beachside version of something, blah, 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 all these wonderful things, right? And then you got to the nitty gritty of what the privilege was, which was receiving funding, right? And so now you have to look at that as, how can I help these individuals during this time? And it did turn to mutual aid. It turned to making sure that these people have money to survive, because during that time, it would have been a lot more things that you can, put people into different segments of movement for them to experience what it's like to be at a hotel, to be flown out, and to see those types of things. But that wasn't what ended up happening. So the privilege that I have of being able to even think allowed me to understand that it's not just about my own movement, also because I have a boyfriend, and he has not stopped this entire time with working. So even though he may have worked from home, and that's a nice thing to do, that brings about a whole bunch of mental hold on an environment that was meant and created for rest, relaxation, and resuming your work. And now we're in a space where we're doing that and we're working. So it now looks like a space that we have to have barriers on how we stop our work, times where we have to put in effort for he and I to come to a natural basis so we can be our better selves and present better. So the privilege I take in stride definitely comes with a bunch of barriers because of my past experiences with fighting to be in a position where I'm able to think and be happy in my own space.
Thank you. So some folks think, okay, these people have it great because they get to work from home and still get to collect a check. Child, that is exhausting. It is exhausting in part because of what you just said, Jennifer. You sleep right there. But then you're 12 feet away from that is your office. And then 8 feet away from that is your bathroom. And then 3.5 feet away from that is the place where you eat dinner and breakfast and lunch. And then 7 feet in this direction is the door. And for some people, even with the level of privilege, that's your entire existence in a COVID environment. Because of what so many of you shared already about not having access to mental health services or sufficiently, that can be a real struggle, certainly for trans people, which takes me into the next thing that I want to talk to. I want to talk a little about, there has to be a separation of work and space. Just because you're trans doesn't mean that you don't need to have the separation between work and life. Even for advocates, you have to have a separation of work and life. I turn my phone off at 10 o'clock at night, the ringer goes off. I can't get another message unless it's an emergency or somebody in my favorites. All right, because if the truth is, if there's a car accident at 3 a.m. in Missouri, there's no flights going to Missouri at 4 a.m. Right, Chloe? That's the truth. That's the truth. And so we have to create that. So I want to talk a little bit about, because this is really rich conversation. So one of my favorite quotes, period, but certainly by Audre Lorde, is this, because I want to hit intersectionality, and we could have had just a conversation on intersectionality and our different intersectional identities, how that bleeds into our work, or how our work bleeds into that, and how we have to navigate all these things while still being trans, and the levels of disclosure. And for some folks, it's disclosure after disclosure after disclosure. So Londyn and then Jamel. So here's my favorite quote. It says, "There's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives." And that's from a black queer woman, an artist and poet. Absolutely amazing. But I want to hear a bit about that as folks who have intersectional lives, which is all people, but again, especially trans people and black trans people and black trans women. I want to hear a little bit more about the struggles and the overcoming. All right, Londyn and Jamel.
Oh, I don't even know what, like, it's so much to unpack within that. It starts getting into the privilege. I mean, everything that we've talked about fits within that theoretical framework for understanding how social and different political identities like combine to create like these different modes, right? And so, oh my God, I could just speak particularly from being a Black trans woman, right? So, I mean, I typically start off with my conversation. I always say, well, I used to always say I'm Black first, right? I used to always say I'm Black first because that was like that was the larger of the oppressions. But in reality, the larger of my oppressions is that I'm trans, right? So I changed it to, so this is how I started saying. I started saying I was trans first. And this is because that is what differentiates me from other Black women, right? Is that I'm trans. And so when the conversation starts, that's a conversation starter. I did this event and you were asked to describe, like, give you 4 descriptors about yourself. Like, you were supposed to give like 4 descriptors, and I guess the people could go off the descriptors. And what I started to do was say, and I started to describe myself as trans. Started to describe myself as trans first. I'm sorry, did my screen, it just went out? Can you still see me?
You're back.
Okay.
Yeah, you're back.
So if I started to describe myself as trans first, it allowed me to be able to describe my experience to people and educate them, because a lot of people don't get access to that education, right? And again, that harks back to privilege. I want to be privileged to be able to explain who I am and my identity, because a lot of times another person trying to explain what it is to be trans, people get this myopic view. They make us this monolith, like Chloe was saying. We're not all a monolith. We're not all the same. Our identities are all aligned differently. And so, like, a lot of times for me, intersectionality is finding it's us focusing more on what's similar than what's different. Like, and if we realize, and we sat back sometimes and realize we are way more alike than we are different, we would get along a lot better, and we would create more tolerance, because around that is empathy, right? And so people a lot of times, I think intersectionality, the undercrux, it's like I always tell people, and we mentioned at a town halls about understanding what's under the sink, right? What is under the sink, and that's when you start going into social determinants of health, which is like that we can go on and on about social determinants of health and health equity, but it's those things under the sink. And so under the sink is like stigma, right? Under the sink, you have your stigma, you have those things that make us so much more similar than we are different. And if we focus on a lot of those different things, we would learn to get along. And so empathy is feeling with someone else's hands, it's feeling with their heart, it's seeing with their eyes, it's hearing with their ears. Compassion is different. Like, people are like, oh, I'm compassionate, or I have sympathy. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone. Oh, I feel sorry for you. But like, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I want you to feel what I feel, so that the next time you won't make that same mistake, right? So that you will actually say, you know what, let me get in their shoes for a second and feel. And so Black women, there's always this tension, right, with trans people, like trans people and cis women, right? Well, I'm speaking particularly for trans women. So with trans women, there's always this unspoken battle with cis women, right? And then there's this unspoken battle with gay men, right? There's this battle between the two. Like, the two groups are always battling up. The two might get together, two of the groups might get together and gang up on one, another group, but that's how it works. It's these two separate groups. In reality, we're all dealing with the same things, for me, who I'm a hetero trans woman, and I like men, right? I'm into men. And so a hetero cis woman and we find a lot of similarities in the same way that men treat us, disrespect us. They do the same things to me that they do to you, right? And we can sit down and get deep into that conversation, but see, a lot of times cis women go into this conversation around focusing on gender identity and start saying, oh, well, if he's messing with you, he is not straight. That is a gay man. If he's messing with you, that's not no straight man. Then we start getting into another conversation of, a conversation around what the body does, right? And so this idea of feminism, right? One of the theories behind feminism is not minimizing a woman to what her body does, right? Like, the idea a lot of around feminism is like, oh, we're not going to, marginalize women to, them having big breasts, or, you know, their vaginas and what their vagina does and how they have sex. But when you start looking at a trans woman and looking at her body parts, and if that's what makes her a woman, then that is counterproductive and goes and counterintuitive and goes against what the ideas of femininity are, because it's reduced down to what the body does. So
that's real good, Londyn. Thank you. Because I want to go to Jamel. All right. Okay. So I thank you. That was real good. I often say, take your head out of my crotch unless I invite you there. And this, you all are a good-looking group of folks, but not a but. And Jamel, you are a really handsome man. And many folks that I know sexualize you. You and I have talked about this. We've been in spaces where folks have done it. And so I would like you to continue with what Londyn was saying about the intersectional identity and sexualization of trans bodies and transness and trans identities, but also adding this in. And this also comes from a question that's something that one of our viewers submitted as well. I want you to talk about all those things. And I know that's a big ask in a very, very short amount of time, but also why it's important to disclose your trans identity.
So yes, I speak for me, why it's important for me to disclose my identity, because at the end of the day, it is the individual choice. For me, it sets the tone and it allows me to control my own narrative. There's a lot of fear and judgment that comes with someone else telling a group of people that you're trans. So I take pride in being able to control that narrative. And part of that narrative is about my sexual expression. And that, you know, kind of ties us back to intersectionality, because yes, I'm a Black man, I'm a Black trans man. Yes, I'm masculine and passable, but I'm also queer. I'm also pansexual, I'm also versatile. So there's all these different things, and why it's important that I control my narrative, because I don't look like what I've been through, or I don't, you know, I might not be exactly what you perceive me to be. And so, especially when I get to the part of the conversation about me being so fluid in my sexuality, of course, it just goes straight to sex. It goes straight to my body parts, and it's as empowered as I am to share who I am, you know, confidently, and to be transparent. It's also disheartening that people can't focus on anything else but that.
Is it my Wi-Fi or yours, Jamel? Okay, start talking, Chloe, because I know we're gonna wrap this up real soon, and I don't want to miss precious time with a janky internet connection.
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that question to Jamel, though, because I personally, as a trans woman, wanted to hear that from a trans masculine perspective. As a trans woman, sex work and being a trans feminine person have historically been hand in hand. So I think we're kind of aware that, you know, trans women are always sexualized, but we're not as aware about how that affects trans masculine individuals, because sex work isn't necessarily historically tied to trans masculinity. Are you back, Jamel? Can you hear me?
I don't know what's going on with Emory or Grady's internet. I don't know what's going on here.
Do you want to continue, Jamel? Would you like to continue?
I mean, that was the gist of it. I mean, unless Tori, you have another question to keep me going. I mean, that was the gist of it.
So finish your thought, Chloe, because that's people. So, and I want to make this clear for all of our participants also. There were a few people that I specifically asked if I could ask certain questions to. All right. So no, folks didn't think I was just prying in their business. I asked specific, Jennifer and I texted each other beforehand. Jennifer, is it okay if we talk about homelessness? Jamel, is it okay if we talk about your sexuality? Because we have to set a standard for people, Mr. Chris, and we have to set a standard for people, Londyn. If it's not okay with me, if you don't ask me if it's okay to talk about my body parts, then don't do it.
Thank you.
And just because we both are trans folks and we might take the same hormonal therapy, doesn't mean that I have dominion over your body and your experience.
Thank you.
we checked in, and I want to make everybody understand that. I checked in with these folks before I asked them these questions, because these could be really traumatic questions,
Right.
not properly phrased. And that's also why they weren't the opening questions. We got to model for folks how we would. You got to teach people how to treat you.
I just told this man that yesterday. I said, I got to teach a man how to treat me.
That's good, right? So with that being said, please finish your thought, because people want to know about sex, and they want to know about our bodies, and they want to know about our sexuality. And I think we started it and we should end it. And it doesn't fetishize anybody that's on this conversation, but addresses the issue so we can keep it going.
Me?
Yeah, please finish your thought, because that was real rich what you were saying.
With that being said, it's historically gone hand in hand for trans feminine individuals, but not so for trans masculine individuals. And I was interested in hearing D. Jamel's perspective. And D. Jamel is the first trans masculine individual I ever came in contact with. I had no idea. And admittedly, one of my first thoughts was, well, I wonder what's down there. As a trans woman, I even thought that, and I apologize, Jamel, for that. But that's something that we have to get out of the habit, I mean, across the board of doing, is because we see this appearance of this person, the first thing we do is immediately wonder, well, what's between their legs? I mean, we have to get out of the habit of that, especially when it has no relevance to you. Unless you are partaking of them and what's between their legs, it's none of your business.
Right.
So the only job interview where you should ask me about my sexuality if you paying for me for sex. That's it.
Period.
About my sexuality or my gender. That's the only time we should have that conversation. If this is an OnlyFans and you signing up, you can ask me many of the questions that you want to. But if I'm applying for a job at Wells Fargo, it's inappropriate.
Like Tori.
For a job at Emory, it's inappropriate.
Tori.
Yes.
That's why I always say gender is not what's between your legs or what's between your ears and your heart and your lungs. Because it's my gender identity that we're talking about. Like I'm telling you, we're talking about my gender identity. It has nothing to do with what's in between my legs at all. Nothing to do with it.
So with that, thank you for that, Londyn. So with that being said, all right, I want to phrase this properly. So folks believe that we are competing with our cisgender counterparts. And this is a conference, we're talking about stigma here, because all of this, and folks we haven't used the word stigma a lot, but we're all talking about different variations of stigma that particularly affect trans people, and even more specifically Black trans people. So people think that we're competing against our cisgender peers, Mr. Cris, in this order, Mr. Cris, Chloe, and Jennifer, in that order, real quickly, because we're down to about 15 minutes.
So I deal with this a lot, especially as a Black trans man who has pursued and had what I consider successful genital reconstructive surgery. A lot of trans people have told me that I'm trying to pass as cisgender, or I'm doing too much. So I even have to deal with stigma outside and inside the community. And even around disclosing in healthcare spaces, people treat me like I'm catfishing if I say that I'm a trans man or I'm trans, and then my body is not what they associate a trans man with. And so I have to deal with those different things. And we try and not derive people down to their genitals, but as soon as you tell someone you're trans, everything becomes about your genitals, how you have sex, and all of that.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate.
You're not gonna have sex with them.
Right. Right. Did you have the surgery? Do you want to have the surgery? All of that is what you become. And it becomes a place in where it's okay for us to be sexually harassed in all spaces, because that's really what it is. Give me this information, otherwise I'm gonna ostracize you or disclose your business or whatever, because that's really what happens in those conversations, whether people realize it or not.
That's good. Thank you. Chloe, and then Jennifer.
So I'm gonna have to exclude the fellas in this because there are things, my brain is always working, right? Big brain, a lot of stuff going in it, right? So one of the things that I always want to do, so thank you for this, like really thank you for this. One of the things that I recently have been battling with how to put together is these things called conversations. I would like to do fire starter conversations. These are conversations that I think definitely need to be had. And there are two individuals that represent communities that need to be had with. And the Black trans woman and the Black cis woman definitely need to have a sit down conversation, a face-to-face conversation, because we have a lot to talk about. So one thing that I want to say in relation to that is, you hear a lot that, as you said, you want to be me. This is what the cis woman says to the trans woman. And like I said, let's bring this all the way down to Black, cis, and trans women. And the reason I say this is because I personally have not encountered a lot of Caucasian or any outside of Black race cis women who do this, but I have encountered a lot of African American women or women of color who do this. So with that being said, no, in short, no. But this is where I feel the compassion and the empathy lags, because it's not that I am angry with you or I am even imposing upon your space. You inspire me. There's a love behind what my identity is. You inspired me. I look up to you. I admire you. You are my mother. You are my aunt. You are my sister. In a way, you're everything internally of womanhood that I wish I could be, although I'm very intact of what my circumstances are and who I am as a person and an individual and how we differ. But I hear a lot of women, and I saw a post on Facebook, and I try so hard to just keep it pulled back. But I saw a post on Facebook where a woman wanted to develop space by considering cis women WOMB, WOMB, woman. And I just thought, it's just not really necessary because we're not impeding upon your space. And I think a lot of this personally comes from, and I can't think of it right now. I wish I would have been prepared for this, but there's this piece in Beyonce's song where there's on her Beyonce album, someone speaking about women battle for not just for jokes, but basically for the for men, for the attention of men. Like women are trained historically this way to battle. And it really stems down to men. And most cis women think, oh my God, they're taking everything away from me. They're taking the men away from me. They're taking the fathers away from us. They're not treating us any different than they're treating you all on that side. Trust me, they're not. They're not treating us any better. There are no magic men that are out here and all of a sudden they cross over to this side from the cis side. It's all like a highway. The same men, the same sons, nephews, brothers, uncles that you're interacting with are the same ones that I'm interacting with. Men are men and they're attracted to a feminine being. So regardless of what I was born, what I have between my legs, whatever all of that goes with, they are still attracted to a feminine being. So in that, we're dealing with the same men in a different way as far as they may be more open and more honest with you and less with me, but there is no competition because they're not treating me any different or any better, honestly.
So thank you. And then we're gonna hear from Jennifer. So there are two terms that I would love to bring into this space that I believe are really, really relevant to our experiences, our communal experiences. And they describe an aspect of sexuality that people don't think about, as particularly our cisgender counterparts. And those words are androsexual and gynosexual. Androsexual is a person who's attracted to manliness or masculinity or the male image. Gynosexual is people who are attracted to femininity, the woman image, etc. It doesn't have anything to do with your body parts. It's about your presentation. And once many of our cisgender counterparts understand, again, just talking to the ladies here, that men that are attracted to women like women. period. And because I told you I'm a woman, that's it, period. And y'all don't have to say this, but you know, the truth is when we're in spaces and when we're doing these conferences and talking and stuff, I find a dark-skinned chick who's over a size 16, similar to me, and I tell her in a minute, I said, you realize if he's attracted to you, he might be attracted to me too? And sometimes they're a little offended by that. And then you remind people, because we're going to talk a little bit about HIV in our closing minutes, and then we're going to talk a little bit about TDOR also. Next two topics that we're going to get to. But it is important to understand, Chloe, there is no island just of trans attracted men. It does not exist. If it did, rent a shack there.
Absolutely. I want to talk about this. I want to do a whole series on this because, and I'm the kind of person that I always like to speak up for the voiceless. It's never really about me. And so it started out about trans women because I was in your group and I'm seeing 100 trans women going through the same stuff I'm going through. Yeah. Then you know, I talked to DJ Mel and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Trans masculine individuals are silenced and trans women are taking over. They have a bigger voice. No, they got to give them voices too. Now my thing is trans amorous, trans attracted men, because you never hear them. You always hear women, trans women, cis women talk about the men and the men and the men, but you never hear the men speak for themselves. And then when they do, they're bashed. So we can't.
So let me ask you this. Chloe, are you a virgin?
No.
You a virgin, Jennifer, by shaking your head? Okay, we got Cris, are you a virgin? Londyn?
Girl, please. Hell no.
Girl, watch. DJ May, are you a virgin? Well, I am definitely not a virgin. So there certainly is space to be a whole and complete person and a happy and successful person, and also to be sexual without being fetishized. Here. So, yes, thank you. So with that being said, so I'm also going back and forth with Lewis. Lewis is keeping me abreast of the time, and the time is coming short. But I want to talk a little bit about, you have an absolutely amazing position and career going for yourself, Jennifer, working with Representative Park Cannon. I want to talk a little bit about HIV, because you can't talk about trans people, and you can't talk about Black people, and you can't talk about marginalized people without talking about HIV. I want to talk a little bit about HIV, how it affects our community, and what kind of work Park Representative Cannon is doing, what kind of work you're doing in the House community, in the Ball community. And let's hear from Jennifer and DJ Mel, and then I have something else for you all.
Okay, so quickly, may I please just hit that. So sure. The subject prior.
You sound like Trey now, girl.
Yeah.
May I please just hit.
I will hope not. That is not a speed that I have the affluent taste of enjoying. So I would like to give to the audience to understand that some of these things and ideals dealing with sexuality and what you like and are interested in may vary from time to time, may vary in your life experiences, in the settings that you have been placed into, and it's acceptable of whatever you desire to interact with, as long as you have a go ahead and it is okay between both parties. So everything is not ambiguous or does not have a closed in lane that you can identify it by, and that's okay. As far as the work that I do with State Representative Park Cannon and coming up this year, actually so I was able to commission State Representative Park Cannon to make Trans Day of Remembrance and Act a national holiday in Atlanta, Georgia. So we actually just signed that paperwork. That rolls out, I think, tomorrow or day after with Southern AIDS Coalition. They're doing a video for that. So that's been solidified. This year coming is going to involve a lot of legislation with transgender persons in the workplace, specifically around the sanctions of these workplaces using their religious beliefs to deny or not even give word of mouth or ability to apply for jobs in the Georgia area, Atlanta specifically, of course, because this is District 58. And more so, it's been very good this year to see how, with the stopping of session early in March, to now a lot of the movement that has had to happen due to COVID restrictions or issues, that when we go back into session this year, they're going back into session with two newly selected individuals of our LGBTQ community. Kim Jackson specifically, one of those individuals. And I'm just so proud because even though that's a person of the clergy, she still has identity and understanding of what it means to be a worldly person. I say that to say it's been a lot of intersection that has happened with a lot of individuals who are running for office, and kind of some of their presence that they keep coming to the state capitol. These are individuals that have spoken to other state representatives, Republican and Democratic, in order to try to get an understanding of what the feel of Georgia is outside of their own ideals, understandings, and needs, which is a big part of running for office, because I believe that we're going to have a huge wave of LGBTQ community individuals running for offices in their selected states and provinces. And I really, really, really am excited to see that happen. But make sure you're understanding issues on both sides of the curtain, because it will be prudent for you to be able to get those types of votes for the next time that there's a voting spectrum. Please make sure that you're registered to vote if you live in the Georgia state, specifically for the runoff for January 5th. It is imperative to flip the Senate. Like, I am gung-ho with the wonderful, brilliant work that Stacey Abrams, one of my heroes, has done, and the fruit of that labor as a Black woman to see come into fruition, that they are made to wait and count every vote. So I am very proud of Atlanta. I'm very proud of Georgia. Let's go DeKalb County. Y'all brought it home. So let's do it.
Great, thank you for that. So DeJamel, HIV and the trans experience. Why are numbers so high? What do folks need to know? And what can folks do about it?
Definitely the numbers being high definitely could attribute to the social determinants of trans people. So if you don't know where you're gonna sleep tonight, if you don't know where you're gonna eat, and sex work is the only way that you can accomplish all of those things, HIV is not your priority. Your hormone therapy or your gender affirmation or whatever that takes for you to get there, eating and sleeping, tend to be those things that put us in riskier situations. The other part, I would say, just speaking from a trans man experience, is the ignorance. A lot of people think that trans guys are not even in a high risk population for HIV, when that's not the case for some guys who are in the same social networks as other gay men. So for a trans guy who's bi, gay, or queer, having sex with other MSMs is too in that same high risk population. However, I think that a lot of those numbers of positive infections for trans guys most likely get lost in data with cisgender women. So it is definitely important to be capturing the real data of trans guys who are positive, and having these conversations with trans guys and letting them know that we are in that same risk boat, if you identify as bi, gay, and queer, and also to the people we're having sex with. Because a lot of times we end up in situations where we feel, trans people period, end up in situations where we feel pressured to do whatever it takes to get through that interaction. You know what I'm saying? We just happy for people to love us and accept us and be there. Sometimes that makes us do more riskier things. So it's a lot of education missing there, and a lot of stigma there as well.
There is, thank you. It looked like Mr. Chris was chomping at the bit to say something.
Yeah.
30 seconds, Mr. Chris.
Just having providers be more aware about how different hormones and surgeries actually affect risk factors, such as trans men or AFAB non-binary people who are on hormones. If they have receptive vaginal or front hole sex, they're more likely to be at a higher risk because of how testosterone thins the mucosal lining. Things like that. Post-op genital surgery, your risk factors change. It's not that they go down for trans men. It can actually go up, where you're going from using a prosthetic to using your flesh you're then in a different risk category. So educating yourself about trans patients and trans bodies is important to really be able to tackle HIV. And counselors and testers need to be more responsible, because I've been classified with trans women, cis women, and cis men, and I'm the same one individual when it comes to testing. So people really need to be mindful of how they're asking questions so that we can accurately give people the right counseling and testing for their bodies and their behaviors.
Really, really good. So I need one volunteer to give us 90 seconds about why the Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is tomorrow. This is Trans Week of Awareness, but why tomorrow is so important. I need one volunteer, 90 seconds. And while whoever's volunteering to do it, because I can volunteer somebody, but while that person is talking, I want each of you to put your contact information in the chat for folks to see if they want to get in contact with you and book you for a gig that pays. All right.
I don't even need the 90 seconds. And this is just for me. When it comes to Trans Day of Remembrance, the thing I could just say what for me is the issue. And more so than about just why it's important, but what the issue for me is that constant naming of the names. And though we should always remember and always say their names, a lot of people, once we say their names, that's it, and we leave. That's just it. We don't put into effect any policies that'll make the changes and make the difference. And this what we're doing right now is how you make the difference. This is how Trans Day of Remembrance should be done, right? This is how Trans Week of Remembrance should be done, around centering trans voices, around uplifting trans voices, but providing solutions, right? So that we don't have to relive those horrific past of watching those we love either commit suicide or killed through violence, right? I mean, we can always say their names, and we should always say their names, but say it while we're doing the action to make those changes. And that's like a big thing for me.
That's good. So in our last minutes, because we're getting ready to go over. I know, Chloe, can you believe it? I know. So what I want everybody to do is I want everybody to leave with an affirming word for yourself, for your community, for folks who are here. So we leave on a positive note. That's a big ask in a short amount of time. But I want everybody to leave folks with one word, one word, one sentence, one phrase, one thought that just lingers in the air after this is over.
Empowerment.
Empowerment, that's good, thank you.
Empathy.
Equally is good, thank you.
Equity.
Equity, empowerment, yes, thank you. Empowerment, yes. Equity. Educate, thank you. Great.
Restoration,
thank you. And my word or phrase is, my phrase for everybody is do something. So everybody wasn't intended to be on a camera and talk like these beautiful folks that you have heard over the last 90 minutes. That wasn't what everybody's calling is. But whatever you're calling, whatever your lived experience is do something. Every person has a role to play, whether that's writing a check or cashing a check, whether it's cleaning the floor or putting down the flooring. Whatever it is that you do it well, and do it so that it lifts people up, particularly in this conversation, and reduces stigma. Thank you all so much for being here today. I enjoyed this. I love each and every one of you. I'm so excited as your stars continue to rise, and I'm so happy to be a witness to it all. Have a great day, and thank you all for joining our panel discussion today. We love you. If nobody told you that today, just know